Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to America once again for the first time in what feels like a good long while. I actually couldn't tell you what my last American review that I did here on the channel was, but yeah, there's been a fair few over the years, but it's nice to have a little bit of an American comeback, should we say. And the beer we're going to have a look at today comes from another brewery that I've never tried anything from before, but from what I gather, these guys have built a very good reputation for themselves in recent years, and the beer we're looking at is an example of one of their signature styles. So fingers crossed it makes for an interesting beer. Hopefully you guys enjoy my take on it as well, and hopefully it makes for an interesting review. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head down to the southeast of the US, to the state of Florida and the little town of Dania Beach to be specific, just a little bit to the south of Fort Lauderdale and about an hour and a half or so to the north of Miami in the southeastern part of the state, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Sons Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called the PB Kiss, or Peanut Butter Kiss to give it its full name, or its Sunday name I guess we could say. This one comes in at 8.8% ABV. They're describing it as a chocolate and peanut butter flavoured Imperial Stout, but I guess we could term this one or categorise it as a sweet or milk Imperial Stout. So yeah, I think this one should be quite interesting. 8.8% though is definitely one of the lower alcohol Imperial Stouts that I've had from the States in recent times. You know, 8% for me would always be the border of an Imperial Stout. You do get export stouts that tend to be between about 6.5 and maybe 8 or something like that, or maybe 6.5 and 8.5. You can argue it either way. It's a bit of a grey area, but yeah, 8.8% definitely makes it an Imperial Stout, but one of the lower alcohol ones I've had in recent times. The heaviest Imperial Stouts I've had have actually all been European, but yeah, should be an interesting beer, this one. And like I say, these guys have built a very good reputation when it comes to Imperial Stouts, so it was quite cool to see that this one was released over here in Sweden. Incidentally, we got this beer here as part of the Tillfälliga temporary assortment through Systembolaget, and it was released sometime in early March of 2021. I forget exactly what date it was because we get new beers every Tuesday, but I have had this one in the fridge for about 2 or 3 weeks at the time of reviewing it. But being an Imperial Stout, that's not going to affect it at all, to be honest. So yeah, curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's a good beer, as I said, and I hope you guys enjoy my take on it. Let's get cracking with this one. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my future reviews that hopefully I can do from Sons Brewing Company. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but hopefully not the last. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the American beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review, especially if you're watching from the state of Florida. We only really get Cigar City over here regularly, so it would be interesting to know some of the others actually. I know Jay Wakefield, a couple of other things, but do give me some pointers. But yeah, the support that you guys show the channel is hugely appreciated, so do not hesitate to get in touch. Always nice to hear from you guys. But yeah, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Sons Brewing Company. So yeah, this brewery, as I mentioned to you earlier, is based in Dania Beach to the south of Fort Lauderdale in southeastern Florida in the US, and the 3 co-founders of this brewery are Corey Artanis, his father Joseph, and then Nikolai Adinagoyev, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. But Corey began brewing back in 2011 as a hobby, and then he soon began to build a big reputation for himself in the local area. He was a very well respected home brewer, in fact. But then Corey met Nikolai on the beer circuit in 2012, and Nikolai has a background as a chef, and he jumped at the chance to head up the food program when he was approached by Corey and Joseph, and when they were just getting the kind of brewery up and going, if you like. So it's a pretty interesting little story. But Corey began brewing professionally, if you could call it that, at a licensed brew on site location, which was Gypsy or contract brewing, and he did this so that he could actually have his beer present at a festival. But he was invited to pour at the Cigar City Hunahpu Day, which is their festival they have every year to celebrate the release of the Hunahpu Imperial Stout. He was invited there to pour the beer in 2014, and some of his beer was served as well, and that was the main reason why he started kind of contracts, gypsy brewing if you like. But over the following years, he continued to garner awards for his beer, and then in 2015 they signed a lease on their current brewery. But the brewery itself is located in a 1940s warehouse, and they spent over 3 years renovating it and building up before they could finally open their tap room in 2019. But they operate a 2,000 litre brewing system, and they've got an extensive barrel aging program. As I mentioned earlier, this brewery have really made their name when it comes to their Imperial Stouts, but the kitchen is also very well known for its pizza as well, and the brewery is named as a tribute to Corey's 3 sons, and that's it. But as of March 2021, and I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 180 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And yeah, as I say, signature style seems to be the Imperial Stout, but they've got various other things in there as well. Some different lagers, some hazy IPAs, some West Coasters and stuff like this. So yeah, definitely an interesting brewery, and a lot of people have been saying they're doing some really interesting stuff. So certainly nice to be able to introduce them here on the channel for the very first time. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Three Sons Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. But 180 is a pretty impressive number when they've only really had their own brewery since 2019. That's well, I suppose they've probably been brewing in that site for quite a little bit longer than that. It wasn't really clear on when they actually started brewing within the place, but yeah, they had to spend about 3.5 years getting this place up and running. Is pretty impressive actually. That shows dedication. But yeah, that's, as I say, all we can say about this brewery. But let's get stuck into this one and see how we get on. Just a little quick look at the artwork before we open it up. There you can see you've got that nice kind of peanut butter thing just sitting on the spoon there. It looks a little bit like a kind of cake spoon or something like that. I guess that's what it's intended as. You can see the Three Sons Brewing Company symbol down there. Also on the side it says Three Sons PB Kiss. We've got the import sticker for those of you that are interested, and yeah, the Independent Brewers Association thing that you find on quite a lot of American beers. This can, incidentally, is a 473 milliliter one, which is 1 American pint. I don't like to talk about fluid ounces, and I always complain about this in the American videos because fluid ounces just makes no sense at all. But yeah, to us, 473 milliliters this one. I think I paid about 70 Swedish kroners for this, so that's roughly about €7, maybe about just a little bit over £6 sterling, and in the States, you know, if it's €7, it's going to be maybe about $8.50 or something like that. So yeah, I'm not sure how that price compares, but it was pretty reasonable actually. I'm sure it was about 75 kroners that I paid for this one. But yeah, as I say, nice to feature Three Sons here on the channel for the first time. And let's get this guy open. The Peanut Butter Kiss Chocolate and Peanut Butter Flavoured Imperial Stout and Imperial Sweet Milk Stout, 8.8%, whatever you want to call it. But let's have a go at this one. Oh. Thought that was going to explode on me there, but it's all right. It's okay. You can smell the peanut butter on that as soon as you open it. Oh yeah. This should be quite interesting. I always find that, I've said this in quite a lot of reviews, that with the American Imperial Stouts, I often don't really find them madly thick. I'm just satisfying my OCD here that the can is centred, but there we go. I often don't find the American Imperial Stouts to be overly thick. I think the thickest Imperial Stouts that I've come across thus far have been from here in Scandinavia. So the American ones, I think they're always packed full of flavour, but I just find them a little bit light. But you know, we are spoiled when it comes to mouthfeel on Imperial Stouts here in Scandinavia, and of course somewhere like Florida, it's a very kind of, been there quite a few times. It's quite a humid place, so it's not surprising that they don't want the beers to be, you know, crazy thick as we would want here. A little bit further north, of course. But yeah, as you can see with this one, and as you would expect, it's poured a lovely dark sort of ebony rosewood colour. This one, if you shine the light through it, it's pretty much black as night. It's only up at the surface that you can get a little bit of a kind of sort of Coca-Cola, Pepsi type thing coming through it there. But yeah, that's a very dark ebony, sort of very dark ebony, sort of black as night colour. This one, it's exactly as you'd expect. When I shine the light through it, there's not a lot of light passing through it, but I don't think that's only down to the colour in this one. I think, does this one have oats in it? No, it's actually not. It's just barley malts and Jordnötter. So yeah, Yeah, peanuts. So, yeah, interesting this one. You could see when it poured, it had about a quarter finger of a frothy kind of medium tan head, but that's just kind of faded away in this one. And I'm surprised at that for an 8.8%er. Usually the lower alcohol stouts will maintain their head a little bit longer than that, but then, you know, things like wheat and stuff like that help head retention. But remember, when it comes to the colour of these beers, they're dependent on a couple of things. One, the type of malts that you use in the first place. Two, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour out of the beer. A big Imperial stout like this, at 8.8%, this is probably going to have a boil time of, you know, a good few hours, but it is dependent, the colour of the beer is dependent on the malts that you use in the first place. But, you know, barrel aging and adjuncts can also add into this. They can also have an effect. They can also have an effect on the colour of the beer too. But those factors are not really at play in this one. And you know, when it comes to stouts, I don't think barrel aging affects the colour of it all that much. In honesty, it's more with like sours and stuff like this that it does it. But yeah, in terms of appearance, nothing particularly surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is. So let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one then, and just see how we get on. I'm very curious about this beer. Yeah, straight away, it's definitely, it is definitely all about the peanut butter, man. There's no two ways around that. And I tell you something, it smells like a big oily and slick stout, this. Yeah, and I mean, compare this sort of beer, if you compare this beer to Omnipollo, of course, that we have over here in Sweden, you know, those are the guys who are the kings of Imperial stouts. I mean, it's just interesting because this one comes across with a lot more subtlety in the adjunct side of the beer than the likes of those Omnipollo ones do. It's quite a popular thing these days actually to add flavour essence into beer, but this one, with the kind of subtlety that it has, I would think it might be a little bit more natural than that. I think it's probably actually got proper peanuts in it, and those are listed on the ingredients list with this one. So yeah, the peanut butter sort of thing you're getting out of this one. There probably is a bit of peanut butter in this underneath, but then I think there's real peanuts in this beer for sure. So yeah, it does smell pretty damn nice, I have to say. I like that. But yeah, underneath the peanut notes, because those are the first things you're going to notice, it really does smell like a big thick stout. So it's got a lovely kind of, if I was, you know, smelling this blind without knowing that it didn't have oats in it, I would think that this was a big sort of oaty stout. It's got that really just massive smoothness to it. You can just smell that sort of thickness underneath it. I would guess I would have thought it would have had a little bit of lactose or something in it as well, because it just smells so thick. But underneath that, as I say, you get that smooth oaty kind of note there, which doesn't smell of overly much, to be honest with you, but you can just tell from the aroma in this beer that it's very, very thick. There's definitely a good bit of chocolate to this one. It comes across as maybe, you know, a sort of 40-50% cocoa chocolate, actually. It's got a real kind of, how would we say, it's just got a real kind of smoothness to it, actually. It's almost like a sort of Hershey's chocolate in a way, come to think of it. The Hershey's chocolate over in the States is quite distinctive. Their idea of chocolate is a bit different from our idea over here in Europe, right enough. It's not, I don't find the American chocolate is as kind of, it's just not quite as milky and creamy and sort of sweet in the creaminess, I think. The American chocolate's a little bit more kind of smooth in its flavour, if that makes sense. I don't find American chocolate as flavourful, to be honest, but that's, you know, that's Hershey's, so that's maybe not a wholly accurate bait or a wholly justifiable basis of an opinion, I guess we could say. But yeah, it does. The chocolatey notes that you get with this are a little bit like, you know, the original Hershey's. I do enjoy Hershey's, actually. Yeah, it really has that kind of thing to it. So it's got a little bit of a darker cocoa note to it, a little bit of an almost like cocoa shelly kind of thing as well, and then you've got a kind of more, you've got that sort of Hershey's note in there too. But yeah, there's one or two little woody undertones to the beer, definitely. You can smell the nutty character out of this one, and it does have a wee element of, you know, brown sugar in there. There's a little bit of a sweet caramelly kind of thing going on, but you can smell the peanut butter. I wouldn't know how to describe peanut butter. I don't normally eat it. I think it's a really interesting adjunct into stouts, and it's much the same with coffee beans. I don't drink coffee, but I love coffee beans in Imperial stouts. So yeah, it's quite a straight shooting malt base in a lot of ways, this one. There's a few little things to take note of, but I find the malt base in this one quite straight shooting. So let's have a quick look at the hops and the fruits then before we taste the beer. So On the hoppy side of things, I think it's pretty straight up again. It's got a little bit of earthiness at the back of the nose. You do get a wee touch of a herbal quality as well, but that's quite minimal. There's a little tiny bit of a floral note and then a little bit of grassiness. But for me, the green component of the hops is the green component of the hop in this one is quite subtle. Now, it could just be that the beer has been designed like that, but I would suspect that when this is a beer that's coming over from the States, it might well have sat in a warehouse for a fair wee while before it's been on the shelf. And it's not the worst thing in the world for an Imperial Stout. For IPAs, of course, it can be critical, but yeah, it might well be that this beer has just been canned a wee while ago. It says canned on the 10th of the 6th, 20. So this beer is about, at the time that I'm reviewing this one for you, it's over 9 months old, so should have a nice little bit of age on it. So worth bearing that in mind actually with this review. I'm drinking this 9 months old. But yeah, so that's probably the reason why the hops are out of it. I guess earlier on you would have had a little bit of a more bright floral quality to it and a little bit of lighter grassiness. But yeah, the sort of slightly more prominent earthiness and that slightly herbally quality you get when the hops drop out of the beer, that suits the peanut butter side of things. It sort of promotes it a little bit. But on the fruity side of the beer, it's quite nice as well. You've got a lovely little bit of a kind of juicy, fruity type vibe to this one. You get a nice, how do we say, I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's plummy or raisiny. There's a good little bit of a kind of figgy note to it. There's a bit of black currant in there, and maybe just a tiny little hint of a more oily blackberry type quality to the beer as well. But I certainly like how everything kind of goes together in this beer for sure. It's a really interesting one, definitely. So yeah, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this beer before you get stuck into it. I think this one could be a very interesting beer. The aroma certainly indicates such. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. This one is the PB Kiss, the Peanut Butter Kiss, 8.8% Imperial Sweet Milk Stout, whatever you want to call it, from Sons Brewing Company in Dania Beach near Fort Lauderdale in southeastern Florida. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. That is quite nice actually. It's like I said at the start as well, it's actually quite a slick Imperial Stout, this one, and it's actually a good bit more darker and bitter than I thought it was going to be. So that's an interesting kind of twist with this beer. Definitely a little bit more dark and bitter compared to what I thought it was going to be. But yeah, it does have that slightly slicker mouthfeel that you'll get from American Imperial Stouts in comparison with the European ones. OCD again, line up the can, there we go. But yeah, I like this. I do like this one. You know, we've had so many big, sweet pastry stouts and things like this recently, that it's nice to have something that's just got a little bit more of a kind of roasty backbone to it. And this one does have an element of that kind of pastry, cakey sort of thing from in the backbone. We'll describe it a bit more in a minute, but I do like the fact that it's just got a wee bit of a kind of roasty element. It doesn't go all out sweet and try and be like, you know, omnipoil or whatever. It lets you know, this is an Imperial Stout. It just has a little bit of that roastiness that you want from an Imperial Stout. So I like that. I like that it's got a bit of a darker and bitter quality to it. So yeah, I'm just going to say thumbs up to Sons Brewing for this. I think this is pretty solid. From what I gather, this is not the best beer that they do. There are ones that are, you know, far more highly regarded than this. But as an introduction to Sons, I think this one kind of serves quite nicely. So yeah, hopefully I can get a few more beers from these guys at some stage. But yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this one then. It's just a really nice, very slick Imperial Stout. So yeah, straight away with this beer, you can feel that nice sort of, it's got a really nice roasty toasty kind of vibe to it. It actually does taste like a roasty toasty pastry, and that's, you know, that's why the whole pastry stout thing came into my head there. So it does feel as if it's got a sort of roasty pastry layer just forming the base. in that middle third of your palate, it could almost be a little bit like a kind of roasty, toasty bread crust. And what you will notice is the bitterness of that gets progressively kind of stronger, if you like, the further you go into the aftertaste. There maybe is a very slight bready layer to it, like a very thin sort of wholemealy, kind of brown bready sort of thing. You will also notice that if you go to the front corners of your palate, then diagonally back, you will get a couple of little woody undertones coming out of the beer in that front third of your palate as well. But almost like down the middle, if you're just concentrating on this middle third of your palate, like I said, almost right down the middle line of your tongue, you can feel that sort of peanut butter sort of thing. Actually, you can really feel that coming out of this beer, because it's just like a sort of, you can almost feel the sort of pasty kind of texture, if you like, of the peanut butter there, and that just spreads out from the middle of your palate. And it's interesting with this beer too, because you can feel the chocolate takes a little bit of time to kind of find its way out. So if you go to the edge of the peanut butter section of your tongue, you really did, particularly on the back half of that middle third of your palate, that's where you get the sort of, you get these kind of powdery, dark chocolatey kind of vibes coming out of the beer. So I really like that about this one for sure. I really do like that. So yeah, the further you go into the aftertaste for this one, you can feel it's like a sort of very dark, powdery chocolate, if you like quite a high cocoa thing. And you'll notice that sort of concentrating in that back half of that middle third of your tongue. So I really like how that goes together, but it does actually kind of creep forward. It does actually creep forward on the tongue as well. So that's definitely quite an interesting point to make about this beer for sure, the way that the kind of cocoa-y type flavours come out. And I do like that. I can really appreciate that about this one. But yeah, you've got the peanut butter form in the middle of your palate there, and there is perhaps in the very centre of your tongue, you've got a nice sort of sweet, oily caramel to this beer as well. And as you move further out from the centre of your palate, you start to get a little bit more of a kind of biscuity, you get a big oily brown sugary note in this one. It gets a little bit toasty actually just underneath, so you've got a little toasty layer in there, then the sweeter caramel notes on top. That's the alcohol, of course, but then you get these more biscuity, McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of things, cookies as the Americans would say, pushing out towards the edge of the palate there. But that middle third of your palate definitely has the highest level of complexity out of the whole beer in it for sure, which is quite interesting. But yeah, I think that describes the middle third of your palate quite comprehensively, to be honest. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you'll feel that it almost develops a little bit of a kind of cakey note there, and there's also a little bit of a well-fired, grainy kind of vibe coming out of it too. But then on the back third of your palate, you really get the darker elements like the black malts or special beer, whatever it is they're using in this one. On that back third of the palate, the backbone is a really roasty, toasty, grainy quality. You can feel the sort of yeasty qualities on the back third of your palate, just sort of giving you a wee bit of an almost kind of fluffy, airy type thing. So you definitely get that on the back third of your palate for sure. So if you start at the back of your tongue, it kind of goes like this. You've got a really roasty, bitter thing underneath, and then you've got some of these yeasty, airy kind of elements, and as you move forward it sort of just condenses down. Then you reach the border region with the middle third of your palate, and then it just goes like that, and then everything else, all those other things that I've described to you before, are kind of condensed in the middle third of your palate. But yeah, definitely a more toasty, well-fired, grainy sort of thing underneath on the back third of your palate, and some of the more yeasty, airy kind of elements sitting on top of that. So yeah, I really like how that goes together in this one. The how would you say, the malty adjuncty side of things in this is quite interesting. I'm going to say I think the nutty, as I say, I'm pretty certain they've added peanuts into this beer, and you do get the peanutty notes kind of come out more towards the front half of that middle third of your tongue. It takes a little while for you to realise what's going on with this beer. It needs a little bit of time to open up, this one, and of course warm up as well because it's been in the fridge. So yeah, this is an interesting one. This is definitely a sipper for the rest of the evening for sure. Although, you know, it is only 8.8%. Make of that what you will. But yeah, let's move on to the hoppy side of things then. So back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness in there. The earthiness actually does build a good bridge with the kind of roasty black malty elements to the beer, but as you move further forward, the earthiness does linger for quite a wee bit. It does then get a little touch herbal, but then as you reach the kind of front sort of corners of your palate, if you like, it does develop a little bit more of a kind of floral aromaticity. So I really like that. I really enjoy that about this beer for sure. It's got a really nice little floral aromatic note on the front corners of the palate. And as I say, this beer is about 9.5 months old, so quite a lot of the hop character will have dropped out. It might be a bit different when it's fresh, if you like. But around the front curve of the tongue, there is a little bit of grassiness there, and you can actually detect just a little bit of zestiness to it as well, which I think is quite interesting. So yeah, that side of the beer is really nice. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer as well, I think, is quite nice. It's actually a bit more. It's got a bit more to it, the fruity side of things, than the aroma would have you believe. So yeah, let's try and break that down. On the front third of your palate, as I always say, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So again, border region between front third and middle third of your palate it's got a little bit of that kind of cakey element to it, you know, like it's not quite brownie like, it's almost a little bit more spongy than brownie, to be honest, but it's got the same kind of darkness, that same sort of cocoa-y darkness that you would expect from a brownie, but it's got a well-fired roasty element to it underneath as well. But the baseline, the sort of base of that front third of your palate is a more kind of toasty pastry kind of thing, similar to what you have in the middle third of your palate. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your tongue, at the back of that front third of your tongue, there is a wee bit of a kind of plummy note to the beer. I would still be reluctant to say, you know, raisiny notes. It's not quite sharp enough to be raisins, but as you move further forward, it has got a real kind of figgy element to it. But then as you reach the front half of that front third of your tongue, then it's got a wee bit more of a, it really has a little bit more of a, say, how would you say, like a little bit more of an oily character. There's a wee bit of blackcurrant underneath, there's a little bit of a blackberry kind of thing, sort of pushing its way out of the beer as well. But really, when you go into the aftertaste of this beer, it really comes across as quite similar to like a brownie or a cakey sort of element. This beer is overwhelmingly cakey, very slightly woody and nutty. The further you go into the aftertaste, it's not overly fruity, this one at all. It has a lot of elements of a pastry stout, but you know, this one's a bit different from the European pastry stouts I've had. And if this is anything to go by, it would seem that the American ones are maybe a bit darker and roastier than you know the European ones are. But overall, I do like this actually. I've not been a great fan of pastry stours, but I think pastry stouts could be something that I could get on board with. But yeah, I like this beer, and it is definitely worth trying. So yeah, in terms, pardon me. In terms of the mouthfeel then, to round off the review, I would describe this beer, where would we go? You know, it's sort of top end and mid-bodied, bottom end of full body. But remember, I'm a bit harsh on American stouts in this way because my sort of base point, if you like, is Scandinavia, and I don't think anyone can really. I'm open to being proved wrong, but I think very few, if anyone, could beat the Nordic countries and in particular Scandinavia when it comes to the mouthfeel Imperial stouts. So for me, this is kind of bottom end, full-bodied. I think it's probably fair to say that. The carbonation is very smooth. It's actually quite a slick stout to me, this one. I don't find it overly thick, but again, it is as thick as some of the other big American ones I've had. You know, 1050 and you know, Yeti and all these kind of things, quite well known ones. It is kind of reminiscent of those, but in terms of hoppy bitterness and malty bitterness in this case as well, I'd say that this beer is probably around 70-80 IBUs. It might be, I think it's something like that. It does have a fair wee bit of bitterness to it. It's not the most bitter stout I've come across, but it does have an element of that. It's got a lovely smoothness underneath the malt base there. It does develop a bit of graininess, so it's a very well balanced malt base. Graininess, smoothness, and a little bit of sweetness on top, but it does lean towards a kind of grainy, bittery side of things in the malt base. Hoppy elements have a little bit of smoothness. You do get a very tiny little bit of zesty quality out of it, and then you've got some nice, just juicy, fruity qualities in the beer as well. But it's a really interesting one. And I would recommend you have a go at this beer for yourself if you get the chance. But yeah, I enjoyed this. I really did enjoy this. It showed me a few different things. So yeah, this one is the PB Kiss Peanut Butter Kiss 8.8% Imperial Sweet Milk Stout, whatever you want to call it, from Three Sons Brewing Company in Dania Beach in near Fort Lauderdale in southeastern Florida. Let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Three Sons Brewing Company. Hopefully we can review a few more beers from these guys at some point in the future. But I think this beer made for a very interesting introduction to them, and I'm curious to see what some of their more kind of sought after, well regarded stouts might be. So yeah, let's leave it there. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Three Sons Brewing Company, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you very, very soon.